that are widely observed. Did you hear it, Corey? Did it work?
Yeah.
Okay. Norms that are widely observed and have great moral significance. Okay. Folkways are norms for routine or casual interaction. And then something is considered taboo if the mere mentioning of it would be considered like wrong. So like, have you ever said, I'm so angry I could kill him or her or whatever? Does anybody? Like, people don't interpret that literally, but if you say that, you're still in some sense violating a moray, you know what I mean? So there are other things that you shouldn't even joke about, like if you were to say you shouldn't even joke about that, that's considered taboo, okay?
Okay.
So let's do some examples. I'm gonna give you an example. I want you to tell me if it's a moray or a folkway. Okay, ready? Let's say, and this is all reflective to the United States because this would vary by culture, right? Let's say shaking somebody's left hand instead of the right hand. In the United States, you'd be violating a folkway. In other societies, it'd be viewed as a moray. Okay, let's say your best friend breaks up with their boyfriend or girlfriend, and the next day you ask them out. Do you violate a folkway or a moray?
Depends who you are.
Depends who you are. In general, what would you say?
Moray.
I would say that's a moray, probably. You violated a moray. Paige was like whispering to Claire, did that happen recently?
No, the noise she made, she's like,
Yeah. Okay, let's say walking on the right side of the hallway. Like it's a folkway, but it should be a moray. Is that what you think? Yeah. So I'd say folkway. Any other examples of folkways? So in the parking lot, have you ever seen, if you're up in Preston's room or Baltazar's room, when it snows a lot, look down at how the teachers park. They cannot park. It's horrible.
no, it looks like that all the time.
Yeah, that's true. It looks like that all the time. But if I'm usually one of the first people here. It's like me and Bame are in that lot at least. Holstam, a couple other people park in that lot. But if you're kind of towards the end, you park over a little bit more. I think that's a folkway, right? So I always try to park next to Bame, and then I park my passenger side door really close to his passenger side door because we don't use those sides, right? It frees up more space. So that, if we don't do that, that's kind of violating a folkway, right? If we parked so we were taking up 4 spots, like the parking there is bad, but let's say I did it like totally crooked, some people would be like angry at me probably, right? So if you're off a little bit, folkway, off a lot, moray. Okay, so let's go back to the distinction between values and beliefs now, because those are elements of culture also. What's the difference between a value and a belief?
A belief is a specific ideas people hold to be true.
Right?
And then values are standards that people decide what is good, beautiful.
Yep. So in short, values are broader, beliefs are more specific. So like in the United States, it's important to be successful, right? To like be financially stable and comfortable. It'd be good to be like beautiful, have a good house, right? Those are values. But a belief about what a good house is or a good vehicle or a good vacation or whatever, those change over time, right? So in the 50s, having a house with one attached garage was like a big deal. It's like, you got a garage that's attached to your house, you're super loaded, right? Now, it's like if you go to buy a house, you want at least a 2-stall garage attached to the house, right? If not a 3. So the value of like having a good home has stayed the same largely, but the belief about what constitutes a good home has changed quite a bit, okay? You see the difference between those 2 terms then? Okay, so we did norms, we did values, we did beliefs. Okay, language and symbol. Symbols basically are anything that a culture, anything that's used to express meaning in a culture that it defines as important. That's a symbol. And then language is an organized system of expressing meaning within a culture. So in some cultures, like have you guys heard of the Graham Norton show? Maybe not. He does like one of the main talk shows in Britain, and I'll watch that sometimes on YouTube, because he'll have like movie stars, like he had the whole cast of Star Wars on, and then he has like Henry Cavill I saw recently. He was the guy that played Superman, and now he's in a Netflix show called The Witcher. So he was on there. There's a whole bunch of different people that are on there. When they meet people, when they walk in, they like grab their face and then go, "Ma, ma," and they like pretend kiss them on the cheek. They don't like literally kiss them, but they get pretty close, right? So if somebody walked into my class right now, I was like, "Hey, how are you?" And I like grab Paige face and I like, "Nah, nah." She'd be like, "What the heck are you doing?" Right? Okay, so doing that here would be symbolic of like me being stupid or perverted or something. But like there, it would be symbolic of me like greeting her, respecting her, right? Do you see what I mean? So wedding rings are symbols that are valued in culture. What else are some symbols that we value? Okay, certain clothes can be symbolic of, so it could be nice or it could be certain colors, right? So in places where gangs are prevalent, like there's certain colors that you're supposed to wear or not supposed to wear based on what gang you're in, right? Okay. Behavior can be symbolic too. What's up?
Flag.
Yeah, flag can be symbolic, yep. Okay, let's talk about the difference between high culture and pop culture and subculture now. High, pop, and sub. I'm going to give you an example. Let's just do examples and that'll help define it. Of something that represents either high or pop culture, and you have to tell me what it is. Let's say binging Netflix. Pop culture, yep. Let's say going to the movie premieres in LA. High culture, yep. To get tickets like the red carpet premiere of a movie, you gotta have some pull. That's something that only the elites in a society do, right? Let's say eating burgers. Yeah, pop culture, right? Burgers. Okay. Eating burgers, eating caviar, high culture, okay? Do you see the difference? Okay, so subculture is like a sub-element within a society. It's not necessarily weird or different. If it challenges the cultural beliefs a lot, that's called a counterculture, right? A subculture would be an element of a society that's set apart from society but isn't necessarily weird. So an example of that could be like some biker groups, assuming they're not like a biker gang or whatever, okay? People that like to get together and like whether it's motorcycles or actually biking, there's like groups of people in town here that like ride bicycle for exercising. If you see a whole bunch of them riding by like in a group, you're like, oh, okay, that's their thing, right? It's different than me, but it's not really that weird. Counterculture is a subdivision that challenges society. What is the process by which we add new things within our culture? So what are ways, or I should say, that we can add new things within our culture? What does cultural change develop from?
Innovation.
Invention, discovery, and then diffusion are the three ways that culture changes. Invention, discovery, and diffusion. And if one element of a culture changes faster than another, what is that called?
Cultural
Cultural lag, yep.
Cultural
lag.
Lag, yep. Lag with my good North Dakotan accent, right? Like bag, lag. Cultural lag. Okay, next, let's go to chapter 3, socialization. Let's define socialization first. What is that? What is socialization first?
I have a question actually about this.
Yes.
So, is it gonna be like the multiple choice questions, or are they gonna be similar to the ones on our unit tests?
Yeah. I'm going to pull them from the question banks. I'm going to read through the question banks I have and be like, I like that one, I like that addresses this question. And I'll try to do a random sample from all the chapters too. Yep.
Really?
Is that bad?
I hate those multiple choice ones.
Yeah. Okay, back to socialization. What is socialization? The process by which,
People develop their human potential and learn culture.
yep, people develop their potential and learn culture, right? So we talked about in class what are called agents of socialization. An agent of socialization, remember, is something that their function basically is to carry out socialization. And what were the four main agents of socialization that we discussed? Family is one. Education, yeah. Schooling, yeah. School education, good. Starts with a P and then starts with a double M.
Personality.
Double M. Well, it has two words that start with M each. Sorry. Okay. Starts with a P. We're sitting next to him right now.
Peers.
Peers, yeah. And then the last one, two words that start with M each.
Mass media.
Mass media, yeah. Those are the four main agents of socialization. Other things could include like different clubs, like civic clubs, let's say like the Boy Scouts, religious organizations, the workforce, those all have the function of socialization. Okay, we talked about a lot of theorists also that had different ideas. Sigmund Freud, for example, he thought that in our personality we had three parts. What were those three parts? Id, ego, and superego. So id is the selfish part. That's deep in the unconscious. Then you have the superego, which functions as our conscience. Basically, is the voice in our head that says that's wrong, makes us feel guilty. And then you have what's called the ego, which is the person in the middle trying to balance the two. Then you had also a guy named Jean Piaget.
Wait, what one's ego?
So ego, remember that analogy of the devil, the angel, and the person in the middle? Okay, the superego is like the angel. That functions like your conscience. The ego is you in the middle trying to decide what to do. And the id is like the devil. It's the selfish part of your personality. Okay, then we had a guy named Jean Piaget. They came up with the stages of cognitive development. What are the four stages to Piaget? Sensory motor, where you respond to stimulus in your environment. Next one has the word operational in it, in all of them. Because operation means cognition, basically, to Piaget.
Pre-operational?
Pre-operational is the second. Third one,
Operational?
concrete operational. And then the fourth one, formal operational. So again, I have all these mental tricks. I've told you a lot of them before, but formal is the fourth, right? 4 and fourth. And in that one, you think abstractly and critically. Concrete is where you first see causation, and the letter C is the third letter in the alphabet. So that's how I remember that concrete is the third one, right?
Oh, that's smart.
And I haven't thought of ways for sure to remember the other two yet. But
What was the first one again?
well, in order, it's sensory motor,
Okay.
then it's pre-operational. In sensory motor, you just respond to stimulus in your environment.
Okay.
Pre-operational is where you first start to use symbols,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't really see causation yet.
Okay.
And then third one's concrete, where you see causation. Fourth one is formal operational.
And those were called or what?
Stages of cognitive development, according to Jean Piaget, Piaget.
And then who came up with the id, superego, ego?
Sigmund Freud.
Did you have to know that?
What do you think? I'm just talking about because I feel like it. Yes, knowing that Sigmund Freud came up with that and knowing that would be helpful for you. Okay, then you've got a guy named Lawrence Kohlberg. Kohlberg talked about the stages of moral development. And in those, Kohlberg, Kohlberg, and he used the term conventional in those. So you have pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. And what's the variable that determines which one you'd be at in those instances?
Maturity?
Not necessarily. A lot of them are driven by maturation, but remember with Kohlberg, it's all about what reasoning you use to answer moral questions. So in the pre-conventional stage, what matters to a person, if you're in that stage, is how it feels to do something. So you punch somebody in the face, take a cookie, you're a little kid, you're like, that cookie tasted amazing. It was okay for me to do that because I wanted that cookie and it tasted amazing. You were in the pre-conventional stage, or I should say level, pre-conventional level. If you're at the conventional level, what matters? If you're at the conventional level, what matters? What the rules say. And if you're in the post-conventional level, what matters is abstract moral principles. So it's funny because like my kids are in kindergarten and they like use the same language, all the kindergarten teachers. My daughter's in 3rd grade, but my son's in kindergarten. And one of their rules is like follow directions quickly. So they like sit down and all the kids repeat these like mantras. Follow directions quickly, right? Okay. And then one of them is make sure my dear teacher is happy, right? So then basically that's the blanket rule. So the teacher can say your behavior is not making me happy. And they're like, oh, we are violating the rule. We have to make sure the teacher is happy, right? So because their kindergartners in general are going to be in the conventional level. Okay, we also talked about a guy named Erik Erikson. And Erik Erikson had the 8 levels or 8 stages of psychosocial development. When I said the number 8, some of you, your eyes got bigger. So remember, in Erikson, what's the logic? It's a struggle you have to deal with in each level or each stage, right? So for example, the first stage is called trust versus mistrust. And that's from like 0 to 1.5. You have to learn how to trust people. The logic behind Erikson is if you don't accomplish that, what's going to happen to you later? You're going to have trust issues, right? Stage 5, which is the stage you're in, identity versus role confusion. You're trying to figure out who am I, right? Who am I? So if you don't deal with that, you might be somebody that goes to college and you change majors and you change jobs and you move and blah, 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 blah. And then like, for example, the 8th stage is ego integrity versus despair. You look back on your life and you try to determine, did I live a good life or not, right? And then the last person we'll talk about is a lady named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Well, we missed a lot of those steps.
You can, I'm not gonna take
Oh, okay.
all the time, I skipped some, I'm just giving you some examples, okay? You guys can look up right, if you understand the logic, you can look them up and figure it out. The last person we'll talk about is a lady named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was one of the early people to talk about and study death and dying. Remember, she had the theory of death and dying that basically said that people go through a sequential stages, and you can remember those by thinking of what little statement? You remember?
No.
Everybody's like, that's like, Dabda is correct, very good. So denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Dabda. Dabda. Yep.
What was her last name?
Kubler-Ross. That's like hyphenated.
Okay. And can you say the steps one more time?
Dabda, D-A-B-D-A. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Those are the stages of death and dying to Kubler-Ross. Okay, and then just a couple other terms. Remember, what's the difference between an institution and a total institution? Institution and a total institution? Institution and total institution.
Total institution is a setting where people are isolated from the rest of society.
Correct. So an institution just broadly is basically any, it's a social institution is some structure in society that seeks to accomplish a purpose, right? Total institution is one that seeks to break down a person's identity and like build up a new one. So hospitals, rehab, those would be examples of social institutions. Okay, chapter 4 is all about social interaction in everyday life. So some of the terms used in that chapter are status, role, ascribe status, achieve status, master status, role set, role conflict, role strain, all those if you remember those. So remember now, let's talk about this. What's the difference between a status and a role? Chapter 4. What's the difference between a status and a role?
A role is like what you're supposed to follow with that status.
Yeah, role is the expected behavior, correct? What's a status? Status is a social position that somebody holds. So to draw the distinction, right? I have the status, one of my statuses is teacher, right? Another status I have is husband. I was gonna say, what are some of my statuses, but that could get dangerous. Okay, friend, I'll find out what people, somebody's like, jerk. Yeah. So, friend, husband, okay? You have a bunch of different statuses you hold at any given time. The roles are the expected behavior tied to those statuses. So like right now, I'm like here doing a review session with you and my kids are at home, and if I guess, my kids are probably fighting over whether they're gonna play Lego Worlds or Mario Party. That's probably my guess right now. So like me, my status of teacher is getting in the way of my status of being like parent and husband at this time, right? What's that called?
Role strain.
You're close, it's not role strain. Role conflict, because it's more than one status, okay? Now, here's another example for role strain now. Role strain is where the role is tied to a single status. So the way I remember this is role strain starts with S, single status, right? So as a teacher, I'm expected to like know the content. I'm expected to communicate well. I'm supposed to build good relationships. I'm supposed to make sure that like my grades are accurate and all that. I'm also supposed to be a disciplinarian to some degree, right? So there's only so much time I have in a day. And sometimes if you're a teacher and you do your job well in terms of being a disciplinarian, there are some students that don't like that, right? Like you take their phone, they get mad, right? In the long run, is it probably a good thing?
Yes.
They're not using phones, some of you admit it, yep. So that's probably a good thing, right? But it makes it like students get frustrated or whatever. So that's an example of role strain, okay? Okay, what about master status? What is that? It's the status you hold that has the largest influence on you, right? And that can vary from day to day or whatever, but so obviously like if you're, let's say you're married and you don't have any kids, and then you get divorced and your wife moves away, right? And your master status would no longer be husband. It could be ex-husband, right? But it would no longer be husband for sure, right? If you're a parent and one of your children dies, your master status probably changes to like parent of a deceased child, right? Which would be really sad, but it'd take a lot of time away from you, right? A lot of mental resources. Okay, let's move on again. Oh, well, one more thing in that chapter, we also talked about what's called dramaturgy and the Thomas theorem, right? And the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. So dramaturgy is Erving Goffman's theory that basically believes the best way to understand SI theory and society in general is to think of people as actors in a play. So the people, like when they enter school, they've watched movies, they've heard people talk about high school, They're like, okay, I'm an actor in this play at school, what should I do? If I wanna fit in, I gotta drink, right? Like your project today, right? And then I have to like dress a certain way and take certain classes and, complain about stuff or whatever, okay? So that's my job now. If I wanna be, right, that's what I have to do. What was that?
Complain about stuff.
Oh, I don't know. I just threw that out there. I hear that in the hall all the time, unfortunately, like,
You don't complain.
maybe not you, but.
I'm kidding,
So, like, I walk out the door, the first thing I hear is, man, that class was stupid. Like, it's like an echo, right? Like, there's a whole bunch of people that complain. I won't say which colleague it was, but one of my colleagues, I went to get coffee, I came back, they're like, what class, there's kids standing in the hall, like, towards the end. What class do you teach? I'm like, Western Civ. And they're like, we wanna be in your class. I'm like that, our teacher doesn't teach us. They just make us do projects all the time, they don't explain anything, it's frustrating. So they're just complaining, right? So, there are some people that,
Were they complaining or were they voicing their opinion?
oh, they were complaining. Maybe they're doing both, but.
Her voice in there.
Okay, what's the Thomas theorem?
I don't know.
Thomas theorem says what's perceived
As real.
as real is real in its consequences. So, Emily Hansen's older sister, Sophie, you know who that is? Okay, so like one day, and so she was like, I was terrified of you. Like she's telling me this, and I was like, why? She's like, cause you're bigger and have tattoos and like are loud and confident and like very direct. Okay, you scared me. But now that I know you, I know that you're just like a big teddy bear or something, I think is how she said it, right? Big teddy bear, like, so the perception of her initially was like, ooh, do I talk to him, what, And then over time, she's like, oh, okay, like, you know what I mean? Okay, so that's the Thomas theorem, right? And then, what was the last, Sapir-Whorf thesis, okay? What does the Sapir-Whorf thesis say? There's kind of two elements to that. Sapir-Whorf, it's named after two people, so S-A-P-I-R, and then Benjamin Whorf's last name, W-H-O-R-F. What does that say? What does the Sapir-Whorf?
That you like see the world differently based on the language you speak.
Right, so language and values and perception are all connected, basically, is what that says. So a couple implications of that is you can think more deeply about things if you have more vocab related to it. And then the other thing is, if you have more vocab related to something, as an individual or as a culture, you value that thing more, okay? So test this out with some of your naughty friends that are into marijuana, right? They're like, they know every slang term for weed, they know slang term for the strain of weed, they have a whole bunch of terms related to how to smoke it, like, like you hear them talk about it, you can tell they value it more and they know a lot more about it, right? So you watch a football game, some of you that are into football, right? Anybody in here into football? Couple people, anybody not really into football? So if I say, yeah, I watched the game last night and Joe Burrow did a good job with the zone read and then he hit the tight end up the seam, you're like, what? You have no idea what that language means. So you can't think as deeply about football as me, and you don't value it as much as me, all right? Okay, let's go to chapter 5. Chapter 5 is on social media. That's pretty straightforward. So basically some of the terms there include mass media and social media. So what's the difference between mass media and social media?
Mass media goes to a lot of people.
If you want to summarize the difference, it basically is how much participation does the average person have involved in it, right? Mass media is more of a one-way, top-down kind of thing. You learn your information, you get it from the news, whatever. And then social media is designed to reach a large audience, but it also is designed to have the people be involved in it also, okay? That's the key difference between those two, okay? session with Limo. Oh,
Is there a
she took
review
off.
session?
For Soch, not for philosophy.
Okay.
Okay,
So.
go ahead.
My bad.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, what is cyberbullying?
It's like harassment over
Over social
social media.
media, over electronics. Yeah, be aware of some of the stats related to that, right? There's not really a lot of unique terms with this chapter that I would worry about knowing. I'm only gonna put a few in on there. But there are some application questions that we'll kind of discuss later.
So how do you like suggest this is the best way to study? Like read the chapter, like the.
I would go back through your notes, because again, I'm gonna emphasize stuff that we've discussed in class. And then I would look through all the terms and make sure you know the definitions of those. And then, again, knowing the 4 theories and being able to apply those is the best thing for you to do in addition to that. Okay, why don't you push stop and then we'll start again.